Hey, welcome back to Adult Brain. I'm Graham, one of the narrators. This is an experimental live read of the 1883 book by Ignatius Donnelly called The Age of Fire and Gravel. Actually, it's Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel. So we've been through part one, the drift, part two, the comet, part three, the legends, and we're in part four, the conclusions, chapter two, the scene of man's survival, and probably chapter three, the bridge. We'll see how long I can go here with this. So this is raw and rough. There's no like this is not edited. I'm editing it as I go, basically, just to record the video of it and to show there was some pictures in the book as well that kind of showed up. So if you want to read the rest of the book, the beginning, like the science part of it and all that, prior to the legends, just go to the live tab and let me just reset myself. Now that my cat is all comfortable off my lap, go to the live tab and you'll see the rest, the start of the book and stuff from over there. So I'm going to show my screen, my editing software, and the PDF that I read from. I'm going to be editing it as I go, rough and raw. This might be a difficult one. There's a lot of weird translations, hard pronunciations and stuff. But I'll try and get through it without coughing and sputtering into the mic too much. I always have this loosens up nasal stuff for me when I read long periods like this. I think that's all I need to say. Let's jump into it. I'm going to share the screen here. Share my entire screen. This will be the scene of man's survival. Got my software over there. And let's get to it. Wish me luck. Chapter 2. The scene of man's survival. Let us pass to another speculation. The reader is not constrained to accept my conclusions. They will, I trust, provoke further discussion which may tend to prove or disprove them. But I think I can see that many of these legends point to an island, east of America and west of Europe, that is to say in the Atlantic Ocean, as the scene where man, or at least our own portion of the human race, including the white, yellow, and brown races, survived the great cataclysm and renewed the civilization of the pre-glacial age. And that from this center, in the course of ages, they spread east and west until they reached the plains of Asia and the islands of the Pacific. The Negro race, it seems probable, may have separated from our own stock in pre-glacial times and survived in fragments somewhere in the land of the torrid heats, probably in some region on which the drift did not fall. We are told by Ovid that it was the tremendous heat of the comet age that baked the Negro black. In this Ovid doubtless spoke the opinion of antiquity. Whether or not that period of almost insufferable temperature produced any effect upon the color of that race, I shall not undertake to say, nor shall I dare to assert that the white race was bleached to its present complexion by the long absence of the sun during the age of darkness. It is true, Professor Hart tells us, that there is a marked difference in the complexion of the Botocudo Indians who have lived in the forests of Brazil and those of the same tribe who have dwelt on its open prairies. Excuse me, I'm just going to redo that one. I'm trying to be as picky as I would be if I wasn't streaming it, but Botocudo Indians. But I do let a little bit more go, but I'm going to have to go. Usually it's at the very end of sentences that I make mistakes. Wow, this is, for some reason, this is going way back. Botocudo. It is true, Professor Hart tells us, that there is a marked difference in the complexion of the Botocudo Indians who have lived in the forests of Brazil and those of the same tribe who have dwelt on its open prairies, and that those who have resided for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years in the dense forests of that tropical land are nearly white in complexion. If this be the case in a merely leaf-covered tract, what must have been the effect upon a race dwelling for a long time in the remote north, in the midst of a humid atmosphere, enveloped in constant clouds and much of the time in almost total darkness. There is no doubt that there and then, let me redo that. I'm going to check on this record level here. Scroll up while I stop. There is no doubt that here and there were developed the rude, powerful, terrible ice giants of the legends, out of whose ferocity, courage, vigor, and irresistible energy have been evolved the dominant races of the west of Europe, the land-grasping, conquering, colonizing races, the men of whom it was said by a Roman poet in the Viking Age, "The sea is their school of war, and the storm their friend. They are sea wolves. They prey on the pillage of the world. They are now taking possession of the globe. Great races are the weeded-out survivors of great sufferings. What are the proofs of my proposition that man survived on an Atlantic island? In the first place, we find Job referring to the island of the innocent. In chapter 22, verse 29, Eliphaz the Temanite says, "When men are cast down, then thou." Let me just make sure that's the right spot there. Let's see here. "When men are cast down, then thou shalt say, there is lifting up, and he shall save the humble person." I don't like that. I'm going to redo it. "When men are cast down, then thou shalt say, there is lifting up, and he shall save the humble person. Where shall he save them?" Check that. If that stays at 45, we're okay. Where shall he save him? The next verse, 30, seems to tell. "He shall deliver the island of the innocent, and it is delivered by the pureness of thine, Job's hands." And as I have shown in Genesis, it appears that after the age of darkness, God separated the floods which overwhelmed the earth and made a firmament, a place of solidity, a refuge. Chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. In the midst of the waters. A firm place in the midst of the waters is necessarily an island. This is more interesting than I expected. I didn't know it would be that much about the Azores. And the location of this Eden was westward from Europe, for we read, chapter 3, 524, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." The man driven out of the Edenic land was therefore driven eastward of Eden, and the cherubims in the east of Eden faced him. The land where the Jews dwelt was eastward of paradise. In other words, paradise was west of them. And again, when Cain was driven out, he too moved eastward. He dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. Chapter 4, verse 16. There was therefore a constant movement of the human family eastward. The land of Nod may have been Atlantis, and from Od may have come the name of Odin, the king, the god of Ragnarok. In Ovid, the earth is contradistinguished from the rest of the globe. It is an island land, the civilized land, the land of the Tritons or water deities of Proteus, Aegeon, Doris, and Atlas. It is, in my view, Atlantis. Ovid says, Book 2, Fable 1, the Metamorphosis, the sea circling around the encompassed earth. The earth has upon it men and cities and woods and wild beasts and rivers and nymphs and other deities of the country. On this land is the palace of the sun, raised high on stately columns, bright with radiant gold and carbuncle that rivals the flames. Polished ivory crests its highest top, and double folding doors shine with the brightness of silver. In other words, the legend refers to the island home of a civilized race, over which was a palace which reminds one of the great temple of Poseidon in Plato's story. The Atlantic was sometimes called the Sea of Ivory, in allusion probably to this ivory-covered temple in Ovid. Hence, Crowley sang, Now on her hills of ivory lie giant weed and ocean slime, hiding from man and angel's eye, the land of crime. And again, Ovid says, after enumerating the different rivers and mountains and tracts of country that were on fire in the great conflagration, and once more distinguishing the preeminent earth from the rest of the world. However, the genial earth, as she was surrounded with sea amid the waters of the main, the ocean, and the springs dried up on every side, lifted her. And the spring, see here, I'm going to redo that. Check, check. And the springs dried up on every side, lifted up her all-productive face, etc. She cries out to the sovereign of the gods for mercy. She refers to the burdens of the crops she annually bears, the wounds of the crooked plow and the harrow which she voluntarily endures. And she calls on mighty Jove to put an end to the conflagration. And he does so. The rest of the world has been scarred and seared with the fire, but he spares and saves this island land, this agricultural, civilized land, this land of the Tritons and Atlas, this island of the innocent of Job. Check, check. And when the terrible convulsion was over and the rash Phaeton dead and buried, Jove repairs with especial care his own Arcadia. It must not be forgotten that Phaeton was the son of Merops, and Theopompus tells us that the people who inhabited Atlantis were the Meropes, the people of Meru, and the Greek traditions show that the human race issued from Upa Meru, and the Egyptians claim that their ancestors came from the island of Meru. And among the Hindus, the land of the gods and the godlike men was Meru. And here it is, we are told, where in deep caves and from the seas, recording, oops, better do that again. And here it is, we are told, where in deep caves and from the seas, receding under the great heat, the human race, crying out for mercy, with uplifted and blistered hands, survived the cataclysm. And Ovid informs us that this land, with a mighty trembling, sank down a little in the ocean, and the Gothic and Britain Druid legends tell us of a prolongation of Western Europe which went down at the same time. In the Hindu legends, the great battle between Rama and Ravana, the sun and the comet, takes place on an island, the island of Lanka. And Rama builds a stone bridge 60 miles long to reach the island. In the Norse legends, Asgard lies to the west of Europe. Communication is maintained with it by the bridge Bifrost. Why is that dropping down so low? This is trouble. Usually stays around 45, so I'm just got to check the pronunciation of that guy. I couldn't get a pronunciation of Gilve. Let me go back to the stream here. I don't know why this level is dropping so high. I hope it's going to be okay from an audio side. Let's see here. Where was I? Gilve. Gilve goes to visit Asgard as Herodotus and Solon went to visit Egypt. The outside barbarian was curious to behold the great civilized land. There he asks many questions, as Herodotus and Solon did. He is told, the earth is round, and without it round about lies the deep ocean. The earth is Ovid's earth. It is Asgard. It is an island surrounded by the ocean. And along the outer strand of that sea they gave lands for the giant races to dwell in, and against the attacks of restless giants they built a burg within the sea and around the earth. This proves that by the earth was not meant the whole globe, for here we see that around the outside margin of that ocean which encircled Asgard, the mother country had given lands for colonies of the giant races, the white, large, blue-eyed races of northern and western Europe, who were as restless and as troublesome then to their neighbors as they are now and will tend to the end of time. Oh, I missed that. I don't want to read that one again. How far do I go? How far do I go back? Ay, 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 ay. This proves that. I'll just read you the whole damn paragraph. Now, the problem is if I get it, now I can get it wrong like multiple times and have to redo this many times. Let's try. This proves that by the earth was not meant the whole globe, for here we see that around the outside margin of that ocean, which encircled Asgard, the mother country had given lands for colonies of the giant races, the white, large, blue-eyed races of northern and western Europe, who were as restless and as troublesome then to their neighbors as they are now and will be to the end of time. And as the elder and younger add a claim that the Northmen were the giant races and that their kings were of the blood of these Asas, and as the bronze-using people advance, it has been proved by the remains into Scandinavia from the southwest, it is clear that these legends do not refer to some mythical island in the Indian Seas or to the Pacific Ocean, but to the Atlantic. The west coasts of Europe were the outer strand, where these white colonies were established. The island was in the Atlantic, and as there is no body of submerged land in that ocean with roots or ridges reaching out to the continents east and west, except the mass of which the Azores Islands constitute the mountain tops, the conclusion is irresistible that here was Atlantis, here was Lanka, here was the island of the innocent, here was Asgard, and the Norse. Check. And the Norse legends describe this Asgard as a land of temples and plowed fields and a mighty civilized race. And here it is that Ragnarok comes. It is from the people of Asgard that the wandering Gylfe. And here it is that Check. And here it is that Ragnarok comes. It is from the people of Asgard that the wandering Gylve learns all that he tells about Ragnarok, just as Solon learned from the priests of Sais the story of Atlantis. And it is here in Asgard that, as we have seen, during Surt's fire, two persons called Leif and Lifrezer, a man and a woman concealed themselves in Hodmimir's Holt, and afterward repeopled the world. We leave Europe and turn to India. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna recalls to the memory of his disciple Arjuna the legend as preserved in the sacred books of the Veda. We are told, the earth was covered with flowers, the trees bent under their fruit, thousands of animals sported over the plains and in the air. White elephants roved unmolested under the shade of gigantic forests, and Brahma perceived that the time had come for the creation of man to inhabit this dwelling place. This is a description of the glorious world of the Tertiary Age, during which, as scientific researches have proved, the climate of the tropics. Climate of the tropics. Redo that whole thing again. This is a check. This is a description of the glorious world of the Tertiary Age, during which, as scientific researches have proved, the climate of the tropics extended to the Arctic Circle. Brahma makes man Adima, Adam, and he makes a companion for him, Heva, Eve. They are upon an island. Tradition localizes the legend by making this island of Ceylon. Adima and Heva live for some time in perfect happiness. No suffering came to disturb their quiet. Let me redo that. Adima and Heva lived for some time in perfect happiness. No suffering came to disturb their quietude. They had but to stretch forth their hands and pluck from surrounding trees the most delicious fruits, but to stoop and gather rice of the finest quality. quality, but to stoop and gather rice of the finest quality. This is the same golden age represented in Genesis, when Adam and Eve, naked but supremely happy, lived upon the fruits of the garden and knew neither sorrow nor suffering, neither toil nor hunger. But one day the evil one came, as in the Bible legend, the prince of the Rakshasas, Ragnaros, Rakshasas. But one day, Rakshasas, that sounds like the Rakshasas. But one day the evil one came, as in the Bible legend, the prince of the Rakshasas, Ragnarok, came and broke up this paradise. Adima and Heva leave their island. They pass to a boundless country. They fall upon an evil time. Trees, flowers, fruits, birds vanish in an instant amid terrific clamor. The drift has come. They are in a world of trouble, sorrow, poverty, and toil. And when we turn to America, we find the legends looking not westward, but eastward, to this same island refuge of the race. When the Navajos come out of the cave, the white race goes east, and the red men go west, so that the Navajos inhabit a country west of their original habitat, just as the Jews inhabit one east of it. Let me conclude, says the legend, by telling how the Navajos came by the seed they now cultivate. All the wise men being one day assembled, a turkey hen came flying from the direction of the morning star, and shook from her feathers an ear of blue corn into the midst of the company, and in subsequent visits brought all the other seeds they possess. Let me scroll up here. Scroll up while I'm stopping for a break. In the Peruvian legends, the civilizers of the race came from the east after the cave life, so that these people not only came from the east, but they maintained intercourse for some time afterward with the parent land. On page 174, we learned that the Iroquois believed that when Joskea, let me just double check that pronunciation. Joskeha. I'm gonna guess Joskeha. On page 174, we learned that the Iroquois. On page 174, we learned Zoskeha. Well, that makes it difficult. Check. On page 174, we learned that the Iroquois believed that when Zoskeha renewed the world after the great battle with darkness, he learned from the great tortoise, always the image of an island. Check. How to make fire, and taught the Indians the art. And in their legends, the battle between the White One and the Dark One took place in the east near the Great Ocean. Dr. Brinton says, speaking of the great hare, Manabozho, in the oldest accounts of the missionaries, he was alleged to reside toward the east. And in the holy formula of the Metacraft, when the winds are invoked to the medicine lodge, the east is summoned in his name. The door opens in that direction, and there at the edge of the earth, where the sun rises, on the shore of the infinite ocean that surrounds the land, he has his house and sends the luminaries forth on their daily journey. That is to say, in the east, in the surrounding ocean of the east, to wit, in the Atlantic, this god or godlike race has his house, his habitation upon a land surrounded by the ocean, to wit, an island. And there his power and his civilization are so great that he controls the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. That is to say, he fixes the measure of time by the movements of the sun and moon, and he has mapped out the heavenly bodies into constellations. In the Miztec legend, see page 214, Ante, we find the people praying to God to gather the waters together and enlarge the land, for they have only a little garden to inhabit in the waste of waters. This meant an island. In the Arabian legends, we have the scene of the So redo that one again. In the Arabian legends, we have the scene of the catastrophe. In the Arabian legends, we have the scene of the catastrophe. In the Arabian legends, we have the scene of the catastrophe described as an island west of Arabia, and it requires 2 years and a half of travel to reach it. It is the land of bronze. In the Hindu legend of the battle between Rama, the sun, and Ravana, the comet, the scene is laid on the island of Lanka. In the Tahoe legend, the survivors of the civilized race take refuge in a cave, in a mountain on an island. They give the tradition a local habitation in Lake Tahoe. The Takulis say God first created an island. In short, we may say that wherever any of these legends refer to the locality where the disaster came and where man survived, the scene is placed upon an island, in the ocean, in the midst of the waters. And this island, wherever the points of the compass are indicated, lies to the west of Europe and to the east of America. It is, therefore, in the Atlantic Ocean, and the island we shall see is connected with these continents by long bridges or ridges of land. This island was Atlantis. Ovid says it was the land of Neptune, Poseidon. It is Neptune who cries out for mercy, and it is associated with Atlas, the king or god of Atlantis. Let us go a step further in the argument. Chapter 3. The Bridge. The deep-sea soundings made of late years in the Atlantic reveal the fact that the Azores are the mountain tops of a colossal mass of sunken land, and that from this center, one great ridge runs southward for some distance and then, bifurcating, sends out one limb to the shores of Africa and another to the shores of South America, while there are evidences that a third great ridge formerly reached northward from the Azores to the British Islands. When these ridges, really the tops of long and continuous mountain chains like the Andes or the Rocky Mountains, the backbone of a vast primeval Atlantic, filling then but... I should redo that one. When these... Okay, let's see here. Got a whole chapter to go here. When these ridges, really the tops of long and continuous mountain chains like the Andes or the Rocky Mountains, the backbone of a vast primeval Atlantic filling, but even then in great part, sunken continent, were above the water, they furnished a wonderful feature in the scenery and geography of the world. They were the pathways over which the migrations of races extended in the ancient days. They wound for thousands of miles, irregular, rocky, wave-washed, through the great ocean, here expanding into islands, there reduced to a narrow strip or sinking into the sea. They reached from a central civilized land, an ancient, long-settled land, the land of the godlike race, to its colonies or connections north, south, east, and west. And they impressed themselves vividly on the imagination and the traditions of mankind, leaving their image even in the religions of the world unto this day. As in the process of time they gradually or suddenly settled into the deep, they must at first have formed long, continuous strings of islands, almost touching each other, resembling very much the Aleutian archipelago or the Bahama group, and these islands continued to be used during later ages as the stepping stones for migrations and intercourse between the old and the new worlds, just as the discovery of the Azores helped forward the discovery of the New World by Columbus. He used them, we know, as a halting place in his great voyage. When Job speaks of the island of the innocent, which was spared from utter destruction, he prefaces it by asking, chapter 22:15, "Hast thou marked the old way which wicked men have trodden?" 16, "Which was, cut down out of time, whose foundation was overflown with a flood?" And in chapter 28, verse 4, we have what may be another allusion to this way, along which go the people who are on their journey, and which divideth the flood, and on which some are escaping. The Quiche manuscript, as translated by the Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, gives an account of the migration of the Quiche race to America from some eastern land in a very early day, in the day of darkness, ere the sun was in the so-called glacial age. When they moved to America, they wandered for a long time through forests and over mountains, and they had a long passage to make through the sea, along the shingle and pebbles and drifted sand. And this long passage was through the sea, which was parted for their passage. That is, the sea was on both sides of this long ridge of rocks and sand. The Abbé adds, "But it is not clear how they crossed the sea. They passed as through there had been no sea, for they passed over scattered rocks, and these rocks were rolled on the sands. This is why they called the place Ranged Stones and Torn Up Sands, the name which they gave it in their passage within the sea, the water being divided when they passed. They probably migrated along that one of the connecting ridges which the sea soundings show us stretched from Atlantis to the coast of South America. We have seen in the Hindu legends that when Rama went to the island of Lanka to fight the demon Ravana, he built a bridge of stone 60 miles long with the help of the monkey god in order to reach the island. In Ovid, we read the settling down a little of the island of which the drama of Phaeton was enacted. In the Norse legends, the bridge Bifrost cuts an important figure. One would be at first disposed to regard it as meaning, as is stated in what are probably later interpolations, the rainbow. But we see, upon looking closely, that it represents a material fact, an actual structure of some kind. Gylve, who was, we are told, a king of Sweden in the ancient days, visited Asgard. He assumed the name of Ganlere. I'm going to double check that one. Ganglere. Ganglere. I had it right. Ganglere. He assumed Ganglere. Check. He assumed the name of Ganglere, the walker or wanderer. I quote from the Younger Edda, the creation. Then asked Ganglere, "What is the path from earth to heaven?" The earth here means, I take it, the European colonies which surround the ocean, which in turn surrounds Asgard. Heaven is the land of the godlike race, Asgard. Ganglere therefore asks what is or was in the mythological past the pathway from Europe to the Atlantic island. He answered, laughing, "Foolishly do you now ask? Have you not been told that the gods made a bridge from earth to heaven, which is called Bifrost? You must have seen it. It may be that you call it the rainbow. It has 3 colors, is very strong, and is made with more craft and skill than other structures. Still, however strong it is, it will break when the sons of Muspel come to ride over it, and they will have to swim." Let me go back to that. Still, it's probably right there. Still. Shit. Edit, redo, record. I don't want to destroy that whole thing here. Okay, check. Still, however strong it is, it will break when the sons of Muspel come to ride over it, and then they will have to swim their horses over the great rivers in order to get on. Muspel is the blazing south, the land of fire, of the convulsions that accompany the comet. But how can Bifrost mean the rainbow? What rivers intersect a rainbow? Then said Ganglere. Then said Ganglere, the gods did not, it seems to me, build that bridge honestly, if it shall be able to break. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Mom, not now. Then said Ganglere, the gods did not, it seems to me, build that bridge honestly, if it shall be able to break to pieces, since they could have done it so if they had been, since they could have done so if they desired. Then said Ganglere, the gods did not, it seems to me, build that bridge honestly, if it shall be able to break to pieces, since they could have done so if they had desired. Then made answer Har, the gods are worthy of no blame for this structure. Bifrost is indeed a good bridge, but there is nothing in the world that is able to stand when the sons of Muspel come to the fight. Muspel here means, I repeat, the heat of the south. Mere heat has no effect on rainbows. They are the product of sunlight and falling water and are often most distinct in the warmest weather. But we see a little farther on that this bridge Bifrost was a real structure. We read of the roots of the ash tree Yggdrasil, and one of its roots reaches to the fountain of Urd. Here the gods have their doomstead. The Azaz ride hither every day over Bifrost, which is also called Azza Bridge. And these three mountain chains going out to the different continents were the three roots of the tree Yggdrasil, the sacred tree of the mountaintop. And it is to this three-pronged root of the world mountain that the Hindu legends refer. See page 238 ante. On its top was heaven, Olympus. Below it was hell, where the Asuras, the comets, dwelt. And between was Meru, the land of the Meropes, Atlantis. The Azaz were clearly a human race of noble and godlike qualities. The proof of this is that they perished in Ragnarok. They were mortal. They rode over the bridge every day, going from heaven and heavenly land to the earth, Europe. Whoops, excuse me. Care logs. Europe. Check. We read on. Cormt and Ormt and the two Kerlogs. These shall Thor wade every day when he goes to judge near the Yggdrasil ash. For the Azza bridge burns all ablaze, the holy waters roar. These rivers, Cormt and Ormt and the two Kerlogs, were probably breaks in the long bridge where it had gradually subsided into the sea. The Azza bridge was, very likely, dotted with volcanoes, as the islands of the Atlantic are to this day. Then answered Ganglere, does fire burn over Bifrost? Har answered, the red which you see in the rainbow is burning fire. The frost giants and the mountain giants would go up to heaven if Bifrost were passable for all who desired to go here. Fuck, there, excuse my language. At the very end of the sentence, the red which you see in the rainbow is burning fire. The frost giants. Better do it from there. Gonna redo it. It's always the last word in a sentence. The red which you see in the rainbow is burning. The red which you see in the rainbow is burning fire. The frost giants and the mountain giants would go up to heaven if Bifrost were passable for all who desired to go there. Many fair places are there in heaven, and they are protected by a divine defense. We have just seen, page 371 ante, that the home of the godlike race, the Asas, to wit, heaven, Asgard, was surrounded by the ocean, was therefore an island, and that around the outer margin of this ocean, the Atlantic, the godlike race had and that around check. And that around the outer margin of this ocean, the Atlantic, the godlike race had given lands for the ice giants to dwell in. And now we read that this Asa bridge, this Bifrost, reached from earth to heaven, to wit, across this gulf that separated the island from the colonies of the ice giants. And now we learn that if this bridge were not defended by a divine defense, these troublesome ice giants would go up to heaven. That is to say, the bold Northmen would march across it from Great Britain and Ireland to the Azores, to wit, to Atlantis. Surely all this could not surely all this could not apply to the rainbow. But we read a little further. Har is reciting to Ganglere the wonders of the heavenly land, and is describing its golden palaces and its mixed population of dark and light-colored races. And he says, furthermore, there is a dwelling by name Himinbjorg. Furthermore, Himinbjorg. Let me see here. Himinbjorg. Furthermore, there is a dwelling by the name Himinbjorg, which stands at the end of heaven, where the Bifrost Bridge is united with heaven. And then we read of Heimdall, one of the gods who was subsequently killed by the comet. He dwells in a place called Himinbjorg near Bifrost. He is the warder, guardian of the gods, and sits at the end of heaven, guarding the bridge against the mountain giants. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. Check. He needs less sleep than a bird, sees 100 miles around him, and as well by night as by day. His teeth are of gold. This reads something like a barbarian's recollection of a race that practiced dentistry and used telescopes. We know that gold filling had been found in the teeth of ancient Egyptians and Peruvians, and that telescopic lenses were found in the ruins of Babylon. But here we have Bifrost, a bridge, but not a continuous structure. Let me scroll up here while I'm breaking. But here we have a bridge, a Bifrost. But here we have Bifrost, a bridge, but not a continuous structure, interrupted in places by water, reaching from Europe to some Atlantic island. And the island people regarded it very much as some of the English look upon the proposition to dig a tunnel from Dover to Calais as a source of danger, a means of invasion, a threat. And at the end of the island, where the ridge is united to it, they did what England would probably do at the end of the Dover Tunnel. They erected fortifications and built a castle, and in it they put a ruler, possibly a sub-king, Heimdall, who constantly, from a high lookout, possibly with a field glass, watches the coming of the turbulent Goths or Gauls or Gael from afar off. Doubtless the white-headed and red-headed, hungry, reckless savages had the same propensity to invade the civilized, wealthy land that their posterity had to descend on degenerate Rome. The word Asas is not, as some have supposed, derived from Asia. Asia is derived from the Asas. The word Asas comes from a Norse word still in use in Norway, as, meaning a ridge of high land. Anderson thinks there is some connection between Oz, the high ridge, the mountain elevation, and Atlas, who held the world on his shoulders. The Asas then were the civilized race who inhabited a high precipitous country, the meeting point of a number of ridges. Atlas was the king or god of Atlantis. In the old time, all kings were gods. They are something more than men to the multitude even yet. And when we reach Ragnarok in these Gothic legends, when the jaw of the wolf Fenris reached from the earth to the sun, and he vomits fire and poison, and when Surt and all the forces of Muspel ride over Bifrost, it breaks to pieces. That is to say, in this last great catastrophe of the earth, the ridge of land that led from the British Islands to the Atlantis goes down forever. Do I redo that? I just had the ridge of land. I'll redo that because it's not the Atlantis, it's Atlantis. Picky with that, but that is this. Let's go back to there and redo that whole sentence. That is to say, in this last great catastrophe of the earth, the ridge of land that led from the British Islands to Atlantis goes down forever. And in Plato's description of Atlantis, as received by Solon from the Egyptian priests, we read, "There was an island, Atlantis, situated in front of the straits which you call the columns of Hercules. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands, and from the islands you might pass through the whole of the opposite continent, America, which surrounds the true ocean." Now, this is not very clear, but it may signify that there was a continuous land communication between Atlantis and the islands of the half-submerged ridge, and from the islands to the continent of America. It would seem to me... Check. It would seem to mean more than a passageway by boats over the water, for that existed everywhere and could be traversed in any direction. I've quoted on page 372, ante, in the last chapter, part of the Sanskrit legend of Adima and Heva, as preserved in the Bhagavad Gita and other sacred books of the Hindus. It refers very distinctly to the bridge which united the island home of primeval humanity with the rest of the earth. But there is more of it. When, under the inspiration of the prince of demons, Adima and Heva, begin to wander and desire to leave their island, we read, "Arriving at last at the extremity of the island, we have seen that the bridge Bifrost was connected with the extremity of Asgard. They beheld a smooth and narrow arm of the sea, and beyond it a vast and apparently boundless country, Europe, connected with their island by a narrow and rocky pathway arising from the bosom of the waters." Oh, excuse me. Check. This is probably a precise description of the connecting ridge that united the boundless continent Europe with the island. It rose out of the sea. It was rocky. It was the broken crest of a submerged mountain chain. What became of it? Here again we have a tradition of its destruction. We read that after Adima and Heva had passed over this rocky bridge, no sooner did they touch the shore than trees, flowers, fruits, birds, all that they had seen from the opposite side vanished in an instant. Amidst terrific clamor, the rocks by which they had crossed sank beneath the waves, a few sharp peaks alone remaining above the surface to indicate the place of the bridge, which had been destroyed by divine displeasure. Here we have the crushing and instant destruction by the drift, the terrific clamor of the age of chaos, and the breaking down of the bridge Bifrost under the feet of the advancing armies of Muspel. Here we have the earth of Ovid settling down a little in the ocean. Here we have the legends of the Cornishmen of the lost land described in the poetry of Tennyson. Here we have the Here we have the emigrants of Europe. Here we have the emigrants to Europe cut off from their primeval home and left in a land of stones and clay and thistles. It is, of course, localized in Ceylon, precisely as the mountain of Ararat and the mountain of Olympus crop out in a score of places, wherever the races carried their legends. And to this day, the Hindu points to the rocks which rise in the Indian Ocean, between the eastern point of India and the island of Ceylon, as the remnants of the bridge. And the reader will find them marked on our maps as Adam's Bridge, Palam Adima. The people even point out to this day a high mountain from whose foot the bridge went forth, over which Adima and Heva crossed to the continent, and it is known in modern geography as Adam's Peak. So vividly have the traditions of a vast antiquity come down to us. The legends of the drift have left their stamp even in our school books. And the memory of this bridge survives not only in our geographies, but in our religions. Man reasons at first from below upward, from godlike men up to man-like gods, from Caesar the soldier up to Caesar the deity. Heaven was, in the beginning, a heavenly city on earth. It is transported to the clouds, and there its golden streets and sparkling palaces await the redeemed. This is natural. We can only conceive of the best of the spiritual by the best we know of the material. We can imagine no musical instrument in the hands of the angels superior to a harp, no weapon better than a sword for the grasp of Gabriel. This disproves not a spiritual and superior state. It simply shows the poverty and paucity of our poor intellectual apparatus, which, like a mirror, reflects only that which is around it and reflects it imperfectly. Men sometimes think they are mocking spiritual things when it is the imperfection of material nature, which they set so much store by, that provokes their ridicule. So, among all the races which went out from this heavenly land, this land of high intelligence, this land of the master race, it was remembered down through the ages and dwelt upon and sung of until it moved upward from the waters of the Atlantic to the distant skies and became a spiritual heaven. And the ridges which so strangely connected it with the continents, east and west, became the bridges over which the souls of men must pass to go from earth to heaven. For instance, the Persians believe in this bridge between earth and paradise. In his prayers, this penitent in his in his let's see here, redo that. In his prayers, the penitent in his confession says to this day, I am wholly without doubt in the existence of the Mazdasinian, Mazdasinian faith. I am wholly without doubt in the existence of the Mazdasinian faith, in the coming of the resurrection of the latter body, in the stepping over the bridge, Shinvat, as well as in the continuance of paradise. The bridge and the land are both indestructible. Over the midst of the Moslem hell stretches the bridge. Over the midst of the Muslim hell stretches the bridge, Is-Sirat, finer than a hair and sharper than the edge of a sword. In the like-wake dirge of the English North Country, they sang of the bridge of dread, no braider than a thread. In Borneo, the passage for souls to heaven is across a long tree. It is scarcely practicable to any except those who have killed a man. In Burma, among the Karens, they tie strings across the rivers for the ghosts of the dead to pass over to their graves. In Java, a bridge leads across the abyss to the dwelling place of the gods. The evildoers fall into the depths below. Among the Esquimalt, the soul crosses an awful gulf over a stretched rope until it reaches the abode of the great female evil spirit below. Beyond, the sea. The Ojibwe cross a paradise on a great snake, which serves as a bridge. The Choctaw Bridge is a slippery pine log. The South American Manacas cross on a wooden bridge. Among many of the American tribes, the Milky Way is the bridge to the other world. The Polynesians have no bridge, they pass the chasm in canoes. The Vedic Yama of the Hindus crossed the rapid waters and showed the way to our Aryan fathers. The modern Hindu hopes to get through by holding on to the cow's tail. Even the African tribes, the Guinea Negroes, believe that a land of souls can only be reached by crossing a river. Among some of the North American tribes, the souls come to a great lake, the ocean, where there is a beautiful island toward which they have to paddle in a canoe of white stone. On the way there arises a storm, and the wicked souls are wrecked, and the heaps of their bones are to be seen under the water, but the good reach the happy island. The Slavs believed in a pathway or road which led to the other world. It was both the rainbow, as in the Gothic legends, and the Milky Way. And since the journey was long, they put boots into the coffin, for it was made on foot, and coins to pay the ferrying across a wide sea, even as the Greeks expected to be carried over the Styx by Charon. This abode of the dead at the end. Almost done. Another page and a half. Check. This abode of the dead at the end of this long pathway was an island, a warm, fertile land called Bayou. Buyao. This abode of the dead at the end of this long pathway was an island, a warm, fertile land called Buyao. In their effort to restore the dead men to the happy island home, in their effort to restore, it looks like that's a homemade dash in there. In their effort to restore the dead men to the happy island home, the heavenly land beyond the water, the Norsemen actually set their dead heroes afloat in boats on the open ocean. Subsequently, they raised a great mound over boats, warrior horses, weapons, and all. These boats are now being dug up in the north of Europe and placed in the great museums. They tell a marvelous religious and historical story. I think the unprejudiced reader will agree with me that these legends show that some Atlantic island played an important part in the very beginning of human history. It was the great land of the world before the drift. It continued to be the great land of the world between the drift and the deluge. Here man fell. Here he survived. Here he renewed the race, and from this center he repopulated the world. We also see that this island was connected with the continents east and west by great ridges of land. The deep sea soundings, which they did in the mid-1800s. Crazy that they knew about all this back then. The deep sea soundings show that the vast bulk of land of which the Azores are the outcroppings are so connected yet with such ridges, although their crests are below the sea level. And we know of no other island mass of the Atlantic that is so united with the continents on both sides of it. Is not the conclusion very strong that Atlantis was the island home of the race in whose cave Job dwelt, on whose shores Phaeton fell, on whose fields Adam lived, on whose plain Sodom and Gomorrah stood, and Odin and Thor and Seatli died? From which the Quiches and the Aztecs wandered to America, the center of all the races, the root of all the mythologies? All right, there we have it. Tomorrow, chapter 4, Objections Considered, page 389. We'll see how long that chapter is, but yeah, that's it. Go back to the other live tabs for the rest of this book. For the beginning, where they talk about the drift and the comet and all the scientific stuff, the last couple chapters have been more about legends and have been more fun. Thanks for watching and listening. Smash that button, all those things that you do, and check out all our books on here and elsewhere, Audible and Spotify. Good place, good ways to support us. Thank you very much, and love you, and have a good week.